Okay, let's dive in. Here's a thought to start us off. What if the very fabric of your reality, what feels solid and objective, what if it isn't quite like that? What if real life, as you perceive it, is actually something, well, closer to a kind of live, ongoing hallucination?
Mm.
Today, we're really challenging that fundamental assumption we all tend to make that there's this fixed, objective reality out there, totally separate from our experience of it.
It's a genuinely mind-bending idea, isn't it?
Mhm.
And it's right at the heart of what we're exploring today. The core insight, the thing we're really digging into, is that life isn't just something that happens to you like behind some curtain of interpretation.
Right.
Life is the interpretation. It's this dynamic dance of interpretive acts. You've quite literally never accessed reality outside of how you interpret it.
And that's where it gets really wild. I mean, think about it. Every sensation you feel, every thought, every single fact you think you know, it's all been filtered.
Filtered, yeah.
Filtered through your senses, your nervous system, the language you happen to speak, even your cultural background, your programming. It's not just some abstract philosophical point. It's this deep truth that the line between life and experience is, well, it's basically artificial. We kind of made it up.
Exactly. We think there's this external movie playing, and we're just sitting back watching it.
Yeah.
But cognitive scientist Donald Hoffman, he puts it brilliantly. He suggests evolution didn't really wire us to see objective truth.
Oh.
It wired us to see what helps us survive.
Mm.
To get a handle on this, picture your perception like a computer desktop interface.
Oh.
Those icons, you click the little file, the trash can icon. They aren't the actual incredibly complex code and processes running underneath.
No, they're symbols.
They're simplified symbols, right, designed to help you navigate and get stuff done without being totally overwhelmed by the raw complexity of the machine.
Okay, so if our everyday perception is like that simplified desktop, that interface, then changing your interpretation isn't just like a mental trick.
No, not at all.
It's more like changing your entire operating system. And this is the key bit, right? This isn't just a metaphor. Different interpretations can literally generate different worlds for you to live in. By the end of this deep dive, you'll see why changing how you interpret things doesn't just change how you feel.
Which is already huge.
Huge. But it can actually, neurologically, change the reality you perceive.
And we'll be pulling insights from some really fascinating areas. Quantum physics, for one.
Right.
The latest in psychedelic neuroscience, which is revealing incredible things.
Yeah.
The whole world of virtual reality.
Yeah.
And even, ancient wisdom traditions that have been talking about this stuff for thousands of years.
Wow.
Our goal really is to show you that you're not just like passively living life. You are actively, moment by moment, kind of authoring it.
Actively authoring it. Okay. So if our experience is more like this carefully built interface, where does the actual construction happen? Let's start with our own brains, because that feels really personal. You mentioned our brains are actively constructing reality. How does that actually work neurologically? I've heard some pretty amazing statistics about how much comes from inside.
Yeah, it's often called predictive processing. It's really a cornerstone of modern neuroscience. See, your brain isn't just passively soaking up sensory data like a video camera.
Yeah.
Instead, it's acting like this brilliant, super fast detective. It's constantly making its best guess, its prediction about what's out there. And it bases this guess on, well, everything your past experiences, the current situation, all of it.
Wait, hold on. So it's not just receiving information, it's actively predicting what it expects to receive?
Precisely.
Mm-hmm.
And then the incoming sensory data from your eyes, your ears, whatever, it's used mainly to update or correct those predictions, not to build the picture from scratch. And the scale of this internal construction is just staggering. Some studies suggest that for vision, something like 90% of what you experience actually originates internally.
90%.
From inside your brain, yeah. Not directly from the light hitting your retina. So in a very real sense, you are essentially hallucinating your reality in real time.
Hallucinating reality.
But it's a controlled hallucination, constantly being refined and anchored by little bits of sensory data from outside.
So, okay, when I look at this coffee cup here, my brain isn't just seeing it passively. It's predicting coffee cup based on, thousands of past coffee cups.
Exactly.
And then it's just using the light hitting my eyes to confirm, yep, still a coffee cup, or maybe adjust if something's different.
That's the essence of it. It's incredible, isn't it?
It really is.
And this idea, it stretches way beyond just our individual brains. If you look at quantum physics, you find something strangely similar.
The observer effect.
Yeah, the observer effect.
Mm-hmm.
It highlights how the very act of measuring or observing something literally influences what's being observed. A particle exists in this cloud of possibilities, its wave function, right?
Yeah.
But it only collapses into one definite state
When you look.
when it's measured or observed. Yeah.
Yeah.
And your interpretation, the meaning you assign, it kind of functions in the same way. It collapses this vast ocean of potential meanings into your specific lived experience.
That's a really powerful parallel. So just the act of paying attention or deciding what something means actually brings a specific reality into focus for you.
Mm.
It's not just waiting out there, fully formed. It's shaped by how we engage with it.
And this isn't just some newfangled scientific discovery either. If you look at many ancient wisdom traditions,
That's Buddhism.
like Buddhist philosophy, yes, or certain Hindu schools of thought, they've long stressed that the nature of reality is deeply intertwined with the consciousness of the observer. They talk about concepts like Maya, the illusory nature of the world we perceive, or the idea that reality is fundamentally a projection of mind.
So this idea that our internal state, our interpretation, shapes our world, it's ancient.
It's a thread running through millennia of human thought, absolutely.
That connects a lot of dots. So if our brains are so busy constructing reality, what happens if we, mess with the construction process? We mentioned psychedelics briefly. How do they fit into this picture?
Well, psychedelics are fascinating in this context because they seem to temporarily quiet down what's called the default mode network in the brain.
Okay, and that network does.
That's the part largely responsible for your sense of self, your ego, but also for filtering information and, crucially, maintaining your usual layers of interpretation, your standard reality filter, basically.
Right.
So when that network gets quieter, those interpretive layers seem to thin out or dissolve, and people often report experiencing reality more directly, more fluidly, less mediated by concepts and judgments.
A raw-er experience.
Something like that, yeah. It strongly suggests that what we call normal reality is actually heavily interpreted and filtered by default.
And what about virtual reality? That feels incredibly real sometimes, even though we consciously know it's generated by a computer. What's that tell us?
VR is almost the perfect demonstration, isn't it? It shows that experiences that are completely artificial, generated by code and screens, can feel entirely real to your nervous system.
Yeah, the immersion can be total.
And that's not because VR is tricking you in some unique, magical way. It's because all experience, including what we call real life, is constructed by your nervous system based on the signals it receives. Your nervous system doesn't really have an innate real versus simulated detector in the way we think about it intellectually. It just processes information and builds the most coherent world it can from that data.
Huh. It just builds a world. And even something as basic as language plays a role in the interpretation, right? You mentioned Sapir-Whorf.
Absolutely. The Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, broadly speaking, suggests that the language you speak influences or even determines the way you can think about and perceive reality. If your language doesn't have a word for a certain concept or maybe doesn't distinguish between two shades of blue.
Like some languages don't.
Exactly. It can be incredibly difficult, maybe even impossible, for you to easily perceive or conceptualize that specific difference. Language itself is another powerful filter shaping your interpretive world.
Okay, so putting this all together, we've explored how deeply our reality seems to be an active interpretation, not just passive observation. What does this actually mean for us, in our day-to-day lives? How does understanding this become genuinely revolutionary for, say, our personal well-being?
This is where it gets incredibly practical and I think really hopeful. Think about most emotional suffering, anxiety, anger, sadness.
Yeah.
Very often it doesn't actually stem directly from the external event itself. It comes from the interpretation we layer on top of that event, the story we tell ourselves about it.
Like two people can face the exact same setback at work, maybe.
Exactly. The exact same setback. One person interprets it as, I'm a failure, this is a disaster, and they might crumble. The other person might interpret it as, okay, this didn't work, what can I learn? Or, this is pushing me to find a new path. The external event is the same. It's neutral, in a way.
But the meaning they make.
The meaning they make dictates their entire emotional and even physiological experience.
That really brings Viktor Frankl to mind, doesn't it? His whole thing about finding meaning even in the most horrific circumstances.
Absolutely. His insight is fundamental here. Even when external conditions are terrible, the last freedom is the ability to choose one's attitude, one's interpretation. So changing your interpretation isn't just like putting a positive spin on things or coping.
It's deeper than that.
It's literally, neurologically, changing the reality you inhabit. And for you listening, we actually have some practical reality hacker techniques you can play with.
Ooh, reality hacker techniques. I like the sound of that.
Yeah. So one we call the interpretation inventory. When you find yourself in a difficult or challenging situation, pause. Instead of instantly slapping a label on it, this is bad, this is unfair,
Yeah.
actively ask yourself, what are 3 different ways I could interpret this?
3 different ways. Okay, give me an example.
Okay, say you spill coffee all down your shirt right before a really important meeting. Your instant reaction might be, oh no, disaster, my day is ruined. Right.
Yeah, probably.
That's interpretation number 1. But what are 2 others? Maybe interpretation 2 is, okay, this is actually kind of funny. It'll be an icebreaker. Interpretation 3 might be, this is a reminder from the universe to slow down and be more present. Or maybe, this is a test of my ability to handle unexpected bumps gracefully.
Ah, I see. Just generating alternatives breaks the automatic negative one.
Exactly. That simple act is the interpretation inventory. It creates space.
I love that. Simple but powerful.
Huh.
Okay, what else?
Another one is the meaning-making pause. This focuses on that crucial space, often tiny, between a stimulus and your habitual response.
Stimulus response, okay.
So the phone rings late at night, stimulus, maybe you feel an immediate jolt of anxiety. Who's calling? Is it bad news? That's the initial, often automatic interpretation and response. The meaning-making pause is about consciously noticing that stimulus, feeling the initial reaction, but pausing before you fully buy into it or act on it.
Just creating a little gap.
Yes.
Yeah.
In that gap, you can ask, is this interpretation true? Is it helpful? Is it an interruption? Or could it be an opportunity? Is it a threat? Or just information? Cultivating that pause gives you back your agency.
That takes practice, I bet.
It does, like any skill. And then maybe my favorite is what we call reality beta test.
Beta test, like software.
Kind of. It encourages you to actively choose a different, perhaps more empowering interpretation and consciously live it for a set period, say a week. For example, you could decide, for this week, I will interpret all challenges that arise not as problems, but as interesting games or puzzles to be solved.
Okay.
Or, for this week, I will see every perceived failure not as a failure, but as essential data collection for learning. You commit to living from that interpretation for the week. Really try it on. And then at the end, you reflect. How did that feel? What kind of reality did that interpretation generate for me? Did I prefer it?
So you're basically trying on different operating systems to see which one runs better for you.
That's a great way to put it. The fundamental understanding behind all these is that since all interpretations are constructions, you have the power, you have the choice to consciously construct ones that generate realities that feel more meaningful, more alive, realities worth inhabiting.
That is incredibly empowering, seriously. Okay, so we've seen how this works on the individual level, inside our own minds and brains. But what happens when we scale this up? When we look at this idea on a societal level? Because it feels like collective interpretations must create collective realities, too.
Oh, absolutely. Massively so. Think about something as fundamental to our society as money.
Okay, pieces of paper, numbers on a screen.
Right. Does it have inherent objective value? No. It's a collective interpretation. It's a shared agreement, a story we all buy into, that these symbols represent value and can be exchanged for goods and services. It's incredibly powerful, but it's built entirely on interpretation.
Wow. Yeah, when you put it like that.
Or think about social constructs. Things like racism or traditional gender roles, or even political systems like democracy or economic systems like capitalism. These aren't just objective features of the world like mountains or rivers. They're profoundly powerful collective interpretive patterns, patterns that we as societies constantly reinforce through our actions and beliefs.
And crucially, patterns that can be changed, that can evolve.
That's the critical point. They can be evolved. If we recognize them as interpretations, not immutable facts, we open the door to consciously changing them.
So if we can actually evolve these collective interpretations, what kind of future does that point towards?
Well, it points towards a potentially transformative future, I think. Imagine, for instance, how we approach mental health. Instead of only seeing it through the lens of brain chemistry imbalances or disorders to be fixed.
Which is important, of course.
Absolutely vital. But in addition to that, imagine also seeing mental health challenges, in many cases, as involving deeply ingrained, unhelpful interpretive patterns. Patterns that can be consciously understood, reframed, and evolved.
A different level of intervention.
Exactly. Or think about artificial intelligence. What if the focus wasn't just on making AI better at optimizing for predefined goals within a fixed interpretation of the world? What if we aimed for AI with interpretive flexibility? The ability to radically reframe its understanding of a problem, to see it from multiple perspectives, much like the interpretation inventory we talked about.
That's a very different kind of AI.
It is.
Ugh.
And ultimately, all of this, from the neurological to the societal, it leads towards a pretty profound realization. Maybe consciousness isn't just this separate thing, this fluke that happens inside skulls, merely observing a pre-existing universe.
What then?
Perhaps consciousness is the universe becoming aware of itself, and through that awareness, through our interpretations, it's consciously participating in its own ongoing evolution, its own becoming.
Wow. Okay. That's big. Consciousness is the universe knowing itself and shaping itself.
So if that's the case, the ultimate question isn't whether you're creating reality through your interpretations. You are. We all are.
The question is,
The real question is whether you're doing it consciously or unconsciously, by default or by design.
right, you really can step into the role of a conscious reality creator, deliberately choosing the interpretations, the meanings that generate the kinds of realities that align with your deepest values, with what you want to bring into being.
Every single interpretation you make, every time you choose what something means to you, like a brushstroke.
A brushstroke.
Yeah, brushstroke on the canvas of this vast emerging reality.
So maybe the final thought for everyone listening is take a look around today. Think about the interpretations you're making. What kind of masterpiece are you painting?